So we've reached episode 17 of The Last Days of Disco, read by David F. Ross. The series is produced by Into Creative and the book's published by Orenda Books. I think it would be remiss of me not to point out at this point that there are other quality products from the David F. Ross writing stable. They are related in some way. The Rise and Fall of the Miraculous Vespas is a story that runs parallel to The Last Days of Disco, equally enjoyable, equally critically praised. And the final part of the trilogy is The Man Who Loved Islands, which sees a lot of the strands of the stories from the first two books brought together in an incredible one-day music festival on the Ailsa of Craig. Also, there is Welcome to the Heady Heights, most recent novel, arguably the greatest novel ever written, or at least I'll make that argument anyway. And A.L. Kennedy, no less, called it a twisted love letter to Glasgow at her finest and worst, shot through with an eye for 70s detail and an awareness of our current complex ills. Hard-boiled tartan noir. Now, who am I to disagree with Alison? Also, the books are available in German by Heine, published by Heine Hardcore, a division of Random House, all three. And the original is that one there, which is the middle one. And the first one was called Shotton Disco. And just to change the flavour a wee bit, this is what I'm going to be reading from tonight. So tonight's episode is going to be read in German, and my words will be dubbed later by a famous Scottish actor. So if there's a bit of lack of synchronicity in the writing and the speaking, then it's his fault, not mine. Okay, and good luck, Ewan McGregor, by the way. So, episode 17, chapter 11, and this chapter is called O Bondage Up Yours. 3rd of June 1982, 3:14 p.m. With Hamish May still in hospital and the threat of some fat franny funded violence now lurking in the shadows of every gig, Bobby figured Heatwave required a new level of security. The last few functions had gone off very quietly and successfully, but this was due to Joey's inspired idea of self-promoted secret one-off nights at the Killie Club. The club was located in the spaces under the terracing at Rugby Park, home of Kilmarnock Football Club, and was promoted by the music-loving manager, whose cut was an acceptable 20%. With the nights advertised locally at 48 hours notice and populated by mates of the DJs and local mod band the Vespas, you heard of them earlier on, there was little chance of trouble. But the Vespas had asked Heatwave to support them at a gig on the 5th of June. It was going to be held at the large Henderson Church Hall in the town centre, and with tickets circulating widely, Bobby was growing increasingly anxious about his own level of personal protection. What about having a word with Malky Mackay? See if he'd do it, suggested Bobby. Aye, that's not a bad call, mate, replied Joey. He's not a bad lad once you get to know him a bit more. Right, let me ken how you get on then, eh? What? I won't fuck yourself. Joey nearly choked on his cabana bar. I'm not fucking asking him, he's mental. He just said he was a good lad and you ken him better than me. Bobby's palms were outstretched. Joey intuitively knew what was coming. Come on, get in there. It was true Joey knew Malky more than Bobby, but the basis of this knowledge was now almost 3 years old. In the early part of his 4th year, Joey had been going through a phase of picking up regular detention punishments in school. These were mostly for ridiculous things like passing notes in class or laughing out loud at an old female teacher's ridiculous attempts to administer the belt to a boy almost 2 foot taller than her, and ultimately having to stand on a box to do it. During this period, Joey had even copped a detention slot for repeatedly sneezing. He wouldn't have needed Perry Mason to get him off on that one, had he attempted to make an issue of it, but the truth was Joey actually enjoyed detention. It was marshalled by a groovy English teaching hippie who evidently considered the short straw of detention duty to be as much a punishment for him as for the detainees. Given that it was generally the same miscreants populating the detention chamber night after night, something of a shared group mentality kicked in, and they all passed the time talking about football, or more significantly, music. The teaching hippie brought in a Dansette record player, and forced his captive audience to listen to stuff like Bug-Eyed Beans from Venus, Dark Side of the Moon, or The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Joey emerged from this phase with a love for the first, a respect for the second, but nothing other than outright lasting contempt for Genesis. Back then, detention for Joey began to feel more like an after-school record club, and although the class was populated by the misbehaved, the boisterous, or on occasion the downright violent, short-term friendships inevitably prospered. One of these unlikely pairings was between Joey and Malky Mackay. As early as second year, it was accepted wisdom that Malky was the best fighter in the school. How this had happened was unclear. As far as Joey was aware, there had been no qualifying bouts before a shot at the title, no mandatory defences against leading contenders of the day. Malky was just assumed to be the heavyweight champion. That he'd achieved this while still only 14 didn't say much for the youths in the upper school, but it did give him an undeniable air of invincibility. If indeed Heavy was the head that wore the crown, Malky certainly didn't show it. Their main connection was through Subbuteo. Malky invited Joey back to his house to see his setup. Poorer kids were obsessed by the game. Slightly better off ones had moved on to Skillectrics. Malky had amassed an impressive collection of accessories, from the dugouts and touchline fencing to the much-envied stadium, complete with politely seated supporters. It looked great, and when he switched on the battery-operated floodlights, Joey was suitably awed and initially a little envious. Impressive though the stadium was, Malky only had one battery-operated pylon, and the empty seats outnumbered the static punters by around 20-1. Joey only had the basic components. He did, however, have some glamorous teams. He had River Plate from Argentina, Cagliari for Italy, and the Brazilian national team. Malky, on the other hand, had only ever needed two, Glasgow Rangers and Glasgow Rangers away strip. His house was a temple to all things Blue Nose. A smiling portrait of the Queen greeted everyone upon entry. Framed pictures of famous goals lined the routes upstairs to the bedrooms. Posters of the team and the individual players fought with pennants for space on Malky's bedroom wall. A Rangers alarm clock, bedspread and light shade kept up the theme. Carpets, curtains and a dressing gown completed the ensemble. Although he'd apparently taken enough of a liking to Joey to invite him back, there was an undeniable tension when Malky wasn't happy. To Joey's relief, their game was going well. Naturally, he was Rangers reserves and he was getting hammered. It was a price worth paying. When Malky's mother shouted up the stairs that his dinner was ready and that Joey needed to go home, he stood up abruptly, tripped over the black elastic strips of his homemade bondage trousers, and collapsed onto the field like some stumbling drunken Gulliver, crushing half of the Rangers' first team and destroying the mini terracing, sending the shocked and motionless fans flying across the room. Joey was a punk tsunami. "You stupid fucking cunt, look at the state of Davy Cooper, you're fucking getting it." And that was just Mrs. Malky. 20 quid, said Malky, in what was fast becoming a standard rate for any services. He glugged from the large Alpine bottle of American cream soda. "Aye, okay, although it's Bob that'll pay you." Joey was grateful that Malky hadn't borne any grudges from the day the tiny Cooper had been forced into early retirement. They parted, agreeing for Malky to meet them at the church hall the following night. 5th of June, 1982. What a pity we ever had the hostilities. What a pity there was ever the invasion. Once we have repossessed the islands, then of course we have to try to mend fences, and we shall do that. But the integrity of the islands must be respected, just as the integrity of each country in Latin America ought to be respected. Otherwise we shall go to international anarchy, and none of our peoples will profit from that. Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister, radio interview for the Central Office of Information. There were 4 in the Vespas band, including 2 brothers playing guitar and drums. Bobby didn't know the names of the brothers, or that of the stand stock still bass player, but he was reasonably friendly with our singer, Dale Wishart, whom he'd known since primary school. The Vespas' repertoire was limited, and their need for some form of support act for their gigs was obvious. Early in April, Heatwave disco became that support, topping and tailing the live music with a vinyl mix of mod standards, stacks and Motown classics. Songs from the new mod revivalists such as The Chords, Secret Affair, The Lambrettas, The Vapors, The Knack and 9 Below Zero made up the general playlist. When the emerging two-tone label artists and the slightly less definable Dexys Midnight Runners were added to the playlist, it was a pretty impressive lineup. There was a real sense of belonging within this group of kids who followed the band. Concerts by favourite bands were generally few and far between, and almost always restricted to the bigger cities. Watching a mod tribute band comprised of people they knew and liked, and in a small venue from which you could stumble home drunk, was a pretty good stopgap. Heatwave had now completed 5 such gigs with the Vespas, and they had all been pretty great. Bobby liked Dale, and despite his often ludicrous on-stage behaviour, Joey also couldn't find it within himself to avoid speaking to him on the rare occasions when their paths crossed. Dale's more outlandish persona had emerged when the band secured an unlikely late-night radio session in January on Ayrshire's independent radio station West Sound. The grapevine promoted the theory that the band had only got the spot because Dale's dad had threatened Mac Barber, a club DJ from Ayr, who had landed a nighttime slot in the station. This seemed highly plausible, as the Wisharts were fairly regular visitors to Kilmarnock's police station and Sheriff Court. Assaults, money lending and drug dealing were among the most frequent topics of conversation when the family dropped into Don McAllister's office for tea and a chat. The Vespas had built a small but local following by doing the pub gigs around Ayrshire, but the radio session had been a disaster. During the pre-recording of their first original song, the bizarrely named The Lego Men Are Here, Dale, in full-on performance mode at this point, unhooked a microphone and swung it in an arc, knocking out the front teeth of Stephen Dent, his band's bass player. A major studio melee ensured that the session remained unrecorded and therefore unbroadcast. It had also given birth to the strained relations within the band and led to an inevitable parting of the ways. Following the first night at the Kelly Club in May, Dale phoned Bobby. It was very much out of the blue. His call was to ask if Heatwave would do the DJ sets for some gigs leading up to a farewell show at the Henderson Church. The event was to support a local charity close to Jimmy Wishart's heart. Jimmy was the singer's father, and it was clear from Dale that this wasn't a request to be answered negatively. In the spirit of charitable endeavour, Heatwave would also be doing this pro bono. Things had been going well with bookings for the disco lately, and with the target of travelling to Spain with the rest of the Tartan Army for that summer's World Cup campaign now almost within their financial grasp, Bobby decided to let this one go for free. However, he ducked out at the last minute, opting to spend the evening with Lizzie and leaving Joey in sole charge. "All right, Malky?" Joey tried not to smile as he saw Malky standing at the main door waiting for Jimmy's van. The former undisputed champion of the James Hamilton Academy was wearing a suit, his dad's perhaps, judging by the cut, and a tie. The tie was a James Hamilton Academy one. Thank fuck he didn't wear his old school blazer, thought Joey. "Got the 20 there?" Malky had always been a man of few words. Joey took the 2 notes from his pocket and handed them over. Malky examined them as if they were forgeries before eventually putting them in his inside jacket pocket. Joey didn't even ask him for assistance with the gear, knowing it would cost more if he did, and since Jimmy no longer came into the venues, Joey resigned himself to a long night of heavy lifting for no reward. The night started quietly. Few people turned up, and those who did were either Wishart family members or associates under orders to be there. Joey played some new records as a warm-up. He'd picked up some rare vinyl at a record fair in Glasgow's Merchant City and a run of old classics, including Eddie Floyd's Big Bird, Madeleine Bell's Picture Me Gone, and Lee Dorsey's Get Out of My Life Woman had the small group of assembled mods in raptures. Joey was really enjoying the power. He also debuted some brilliant new songs like Odyssey's Inside Out and the Associates' Party Fears 2. Many of these were elongated 12-inch mixes in order to avoid him having to speak and run the risk of patronising or offending the Wishards. Dale came over to say that his band would be on stage at 9 in around 30 minutes. The singer looked thoroughly defeated. Gone were the sharp Fred Perrys and Lonsdale shirts of old. Now he was all floppy hair, batwing shirt and lycra trousers. He wore leg warmers and gleaming white patent shoes. Joey felt for him. It was apparent that there were some considerable musical differences at the core of the Vespas. There was a faint glimmer of a smile when Dale said the band would be starting with their own version of the Jam's cover of Heatwave, and that the DJ should activate the smoke machines and strobes just for old time's sake. Just before the Vespas entered stage left, a large mob piled into the church hall. There was no immediate commotion. They all paid and made their way into the middle of the hall. Joey whispered to Malky that perhaps there would be a decent atmosphere for the Vespas farewell after all. Malky couldn't care less. At 5 to 9, the main lights went down and the curling dense smoke began to fill the church hall. Joey could still see the tall, skinny singer through the fog. Even from the opposite end of the smoke-filled hall, there appeared to be a sparkle in his eye as he stood front and centre stage, clocking the half-full venue rather than the embarrassing turnout he'd anticipated 20 minutes earlier. Hiya, Kilt, not weird that we got built at music, love you, aight. It was hardly hello and Johnny Cash, but nevertheless Joey had to admire his enthusiasm. From his position on stage though, Dale was unaware that his microphone wasn't working fully and he sounded like Norman Collier. "We, Heatwave," shouted Dale. The opening bars of the first song were terrible. The sound was tinny and monotonal. It was like Ultravox heard underwater. Even though the events that followed were regrettable, Joey Miller was almost grateful to the punter in the front row who threw the empty bottle that hit the singer in the face, stopping his song before the end. It quickly became apparent that this was no protest act from an insulted music fan. The large group who had come late to the gig took the bottling as a signal to attack the stage and those on it, prompting a counter by the surprised Wishards and their followers. A full-scale riot ensued. Joey missed most of it, as he had bolted for a side door and found himself at the back of a female toilet. If he was going to be beaten to a pulp, several heavily made-up females would either be ahead of him in the queue or would be responsible for it. As Joey cowered at the side of a cistern, the noise from the main hall was incredible. Stained glass windows that had survived for more than a century were sure to be among the victims, as was the majority of Heatwave Disco's sound equipment and record stocks, Joey figured. A 12-inch single carefully thrown could be a handy weapon, and Joey envisaged emerging into a scene of carnage where casualties lay with "Let's start the dance again" or the message embedded in their skulls. At 9:30, Joey was still ensconced in a girl's toilet cubicle. The noise had died sufficiently to hear the more welcome sounds of approaching sirens. He unlocked the door and, along with fellow cautious deserters, ventured carefully back into the main hall and towards the only available exit beyond. The scene was a familiar one, but its familiarity was associated with last year's scenes from Ulster. Windows were indeed smashed, the injured were nursing wounds, and the recently arrived cops were lifting those left standing. The Heatwave gear was in better condition than Joey was entitled to expect. It was apparent that Malky had in fact earned his 20. A few lights were out and the speakers were on their side, but there were no shattered fragments of black plastic lying around, looking as if they had been targets at a clay pigeon shoot. The focus of the crowd's anger had been directed towards the stage end of the hall, whereas Joey had set up at the rear. As for the actual stage itself, the band was gone, their instruments strewn all over the place. apart from a synthesizer that, although still upright, was on fire. In the days that followed, it transpired that there was no charity. The gig was an attempt by the Wisharts to raise money to pay off a Glasgow gang from whom they had taken large amounts of drugs that they had been unable to move on. The Quinn rent-a-mob was hired by Fat Franny, but badly briefed by Hobnail. He'd only mentioned the word Heatwave, and when the heavies misheard Dale's opening introduction, the leader simply launched his bottle in the direction of the code word. To make matters worse, they'd all got there late due to a bus driver's strike. Dale Wishart, formerly of the Vespas, was in intensive care in Crosshouse Hospital. He'd been opportunistically walloped by his bass player's bass while trying to get his bearings following the bottle's impact. Bobby visited him only once in hospital the day after the gig on the way to see Hamish May, but it was still once more than joy.